The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room Cole had ever seen. Crystal walls rose toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves. Light from a dying sun poured through windows made of materials humanity had no name for. 17 alien species sat in their places, watching her with eyes, sensors, and organs she could not identify. Was 53 years old. Her dark hair had streaks of silver now, and her face carried the lines of too many difficult conversations. She had served as humanity's ambassador for 11 years, and in all that time, she had never grown used to the feeling of being judged by creatures who had walked among the stars when her ancestors were still living in caves. She stepped forward to the speaking platform. Her aide, a young man named, stood behind her with a data tablet pressed against his chest. His hands were shaking slightly. Did not blame him. The weight of human hopes rested on their shoulders today. High Chancellor looked down at her from his elevated seat. He was a species known for their 4 arms and skin that glowed with soft blue light. His people had been traveling between stars for over 50,000 years. To him, humanity was like a child who had just learned to walk and now wanted to run. The human petition for full membership is acknowledged, announced. His voice echoed through translation devices that made his words understandable to every species present. You may speak. Took a breath. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but practice could never prepare anyone for this moment. Distinguished members of the council, she began, humanity comes before you today not to ask for charity. We come to claim what we have earned. She touched a control on the speaking platform. Images appeared in the air around her, showing human ships defending alien worlds, human doctors treating alien patients, human engineers building stations that served species who had never heard of Earth. In the 200 years since we first made contact with the galactic community, humanity has proven itself again and again. We have defended the outer rim against raiders. We have shared medical knowledge that has saved millions of lives across 12 species. We have honored every agreement, kept every promise, and asked for nothing in return except the chance to be heard. She paused, looking around the chamber. Some faces showed interest. Others showed doubt. Many showed nothing at all. We ask now for what any species deserves after such service. A voice, a vote, the right to help shape the future of a galaxy we have shed our blood to protect. The silence that followed her words stretched on for what felt like hours. Then the representative, a being made of living stone with fire burning in the cracks of his body, spoke up. The humans expand too quickly, rumbled. 3 new colonies in 10 years. Where does this hunger end? Those colonies were established within the boundaries set by our treaties, said quickly. Gave him a small look. Speaking out of turn in the council chamber was considered rude, but she understood his frustration. The accusation was unfair and they both knew it. Raised one of his 4 hands. The young human speaks without permission. This is the impatience many of us have observed in your species. Humans are always rushing forward, always reaching for more. It concerns us. Kept her face calm even as anger burned in her chest. We are what we needed to become to survive, she said carefully. Our world was harsh. It taught us to adapt quickly or die. That same strength has made us valuable allies to this council. More species spoke. Some praised humanity's contributions. Others raised concerns about human military power, human ambition, human creativity. Always the message was the same. Humanity was different. Humanity was strange. Humanity could not quite be trusted. When the vote finally came, watched the numbers appear on the central display. She already knew what they would show. She had known before she ever entered this chamber. 11 against, 6 in favor. The council has spoken, announced. Humanity will keep its observer status. This matter may be considered again in 10 years. Bowed her head. It was the response expected of her. Humanity thanks those who supported us, she said. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. As she turned to leave, she heard the whispers. The translation systems caught pieces of them and fed them into her earpiece. Primitive, dangerous, not ready, perhaps never ready. The great doors closed behind her, with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Walked beside her in silence for a long time. The corridors of the council station were beautiful, built from materials that shifted color as they passed. Barely saw any of it. "I'm sorry," finally said. "I shouldn't have spoken out of turn. Maybe if I had stayed quiet." "It would not have mattered," interrupted. "The decision was made before we arrived. It was probably made years ago. Maybe it was made the first time a human ship entered this system. Then why do we keep trying?" Stopped walking. She looked at, seeing in his young face the same confusion and hurt that she felt in her own heart. He believed in the mission. He believed that if humanity just worked hard enough, proved themselves enough, eventually the council would accept them. She had believed that too once. "We keep trying because it is who we are," she said. "But perhaps," she paused, considering her next words carefully, "perhaps it is time to consider what we do when trying is no longer enough." Stared at her. "What do you mean?" Resumed walking. Her steps were slow, thoughtful. "Contact Earth," she said. "Tell them the vote failed, and tell them I will be submitting my recommendations for a new approach to galactic relations." "What kind of approach?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked out a window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, past the borders of council space, lay regions unexplored and species uncontacted. The council had the center of the galaxy. Perhaps humanity's future lay elsewhere. "The kind of approach," she finally said, "that does not require anyone's permission but our own." That night, alone in her quarters, wrote her report to Earth. She detailed every dismissive comment, every unfair accusation, every moment when humanity's sacrifices had been acknowledged and then immediately forgotten. She described a council that would never accept them, not because of what humanity had done, but because of what humanity was. And at the end of her report, she wrote a single recommendation. Humanity needed to start planning for a future without the council. Not war, not revenge, simply independence, a quiet walking away from those who would never welcome them. She sent the message and sat in the darkness for a long time, watching the stars and wondering what her children's children would think of the choice she was asking her people to make. Somewhere, she knew, the council was continuing its business without a single thought for the species they had just rejected. They did not know that their decision would change the galaxy forever. They did not understand that humanity's greatest strength was not its ships or its soldiers or its science. It was the ability to finally, quietly let go. 3 years after the failed vote, Captain Daniel Price stood on the bridge of his ship and watched a world begin to die. The horizon's edge was a military vessel, built for speed and combat. Daniel had commanded her for 7 years, defending borders that the Galactic Council barely acknowledged existed. He was 41 years old, with a face weathered by too many battles and eyes that had seen too many friends die. The distress signal had come 20 minutes ago. A colony called Prime was under attack. Shroud vessels, the ancient enemy that lurked in the dark spaces between stars, had broken through the outer defenses. 50,000 civilians were trapped on the surface, waiting for rescue that might never come. "Sir, we are the closest ship," reported Lieutenant Commander Susan Hall, his first officer. She was a small woman with steady hands and a voice that never wavered, even when delivering terrible news. "Council forces are 6 hours away. The colony will be overrun in 2. Daniel stared at the display showing the world. They had voted against humanity in every single membership petition. Their High Chancellor had publicly called humans a galactic adolescent in a speech that had humiliated Earth's government. They did not want humanity's help. They had made that clear many times. But there were children on that planet. Families. People who had never voted for anything in their lives and had no control over what their leaders said or did. "Set course for Prime," Daniel ordered. "All hands to battle stations." Susan looked at him for a long moment. "Sir, the shroud vessels are Harbinger class. Our weapons may not even scratch them." "Then we will have to be clever." Daniel sat down in his command chair. "Launch all fighters when we arrive. I want a defensive wall around those evacuation transports." The horizon's edge dropped out of hyperspace above a world in chaos. 3 massive shroud vessels hung in orbit, organic nightmares of black shell and writhing tentacles. They were systematically destroying everything they could reach. The planetary shield was failing. Small transport ships trying to flee were being picked off like insects. Daniel opened a channel to the surface. A face appeared on his screen, a female with terror in her glowing eyes. "Human vessel," she said, her voice shaking. "You received our signal. We are here to help. Start loading your people onto transports. We will cover your escape." "But your ship, 1 vessel against 3 harbingers. You cannot possibly." "Let us worry about that. Just get your people moving. We do not have much time." The battle that followed would later become famous across the galaxy. Military academies would study it for centuries. Historians would call it the most creative display of human warfare ever recorded. Daniel used everything available to him. He flew his ship through the debris field of destroyed stations, using the wreckage as shields against shroud weapons. He ordered maneuvers that pushed his vessel to its breaking point, turned so sharp that the hull groaned and crew members were thrown against walls. When one harbinger got too close, he rammed a damaged section of his own ship directly into its sensory cluster, blinding the creature long enough for the evacuation transports to slip past. Hours passed. The horizon's edge was hit again and again. Sections of the ship went dark. Fires broke out in the lower decks. Crew members died at their posts, replaced by others who stepped up without hesitation. Daniel lost 47 people that day. 47 humans who gave their lives for a species that had rejected them. When he finally had a moment to process the number, he found he could not cry. He was too tired, too empty. The Council fleet arrived just as the last transport escaped. They drove off the remaining shroud vessels and secured the system. 23,000 civilians had been saved. 23,000 lives that would have been lost without human sacrifice. High Chancellor himself came to inspect the aftermath. He was old now, his glow fading with age, but he still carried the authority of his position. He walked through the damaged hangar of the horizon's edge, looking at exhausted human crew members and the refugees they had protected. Daniel stood at attention when approached him. His uniform was stained with coolant and blood, some of it his own, most of it not. "Captain Price," said slowly, "your actions were unexpected." "We responded to a distress call, Chancellor. That is all." "You risked your ship, your crew, your life, for a species that has not been kind to yours." Daniel met the Chancellor's glowing eyes without flinching. "With respect, Chancellor, those were not politicians down there. They were families. They were children. They did not deserve to die because of how their government votes." Was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he lowered his head in a gesture of respect that Daniel had never seen a give to a human. "Perhaps," the Chancellor said quietly, "we have misjudged certain things about your species." 3 months later, humanity submitted another petition for full Council membership. The voted in favor for the first time in history. Himself spoke on humanity's behalf, describing the battle above Prime and the sacrifice of 47 human lives for people who were strangers to them. The final count came, 11 against, 6 in favor. The same result as always. Other species had found new reasons to keep humanity out. Ambassador Cole received the news in her office. She had expected nothing else. She had stopped expecting anything else years ago. "The Chancellor wishes to speak with you privately," told her. met her in a small room away from the main chamber. His forearms were folded tight against his body. "I voted for you," he said. "I wanted you to know." "I know, Chancellor, and I thank you." It was not enough. The others fear what they do not understand, and they do not understand humanity. Smiled, but there was no joy in it. No, they never have. "What will your people do now?" She thought about her report to Earth 3 years ago. She thought about the plans that were already in motion, the quiet preparations that no one outside humanity knew about. "We will do what we have always done," she said. "We will help, we will defend, we will wait." But even as she spoke the words, knew that humanity's patience was running out. The blood of 47 crew members cried out from the deck of a damaged ship. The gratitude of 23,000 saved lives meant nothing to a council that would never change its mind. Somewhere in the hearts of her people, a decision was forming, not yet spoken, not yet acted upon, but growing stronger with every rejection, every dismissal, every time humanity reached out its hand and found nothing reaching back. The council had one more chance. They did not know it yet, but the clock was ticking, and humanity was beginning to wonder if some doors were simply never meant to open. 5 more years passed. Humanity continued to help. Humanity continued to be rejected. Carol sat in her office on Earth's largest orbital station, reading the latest message from the Galactic Council. Another vote had been held. Another petition had failed. This time, the count was 13 against and 4 in favor. They were actually losing support. Carol was 60 years old. She had taken over the Department of Galactic Relations when Cole retired, and in her 3 years running it, she had watched humanity's position grow worse instead of better. The hope that had once driven their efforts was dying. Something else was taking its place. Her door opened. Doctor walked in, carrying a small crystal that contained more information than 1,000 books. He was the head of humanity's research division, a brilliant man who had spent his life studying the technologies and cultures of the galaxy. "Administrator," he said, "we need to talk." Carol pointed to a chair, sat down and placed the crystal on her desk. He touched it, and numbers filled the air between them. "You asked me to analyze our relationship with the Council," began. "What we have given versus what we have received. I finished the report." Carol looked at the floating data: ships lost, lives sacrificed, technologies shared, trade agreements signed and broken. "In 50 years," said, "humanity has answered over 400 distress calls from Council species. We have lost 83 ships. Over 12,000 of our people have died protecting those who call us primitive." He paused, letting the number sink in. "We have shared medical advances that extended for 11 different species. We have built defensive systems that protect almost half of all Council border stations." "And in return?" Carol asked, though she already knew the answer. "Trade agreements that favor Council species by more than 60%. Territorial limits that give us 1/3 the space of comparable species. No voting rights. No representation. No voice in decisions that affect our own people." Carol studied the numbers in silence. Each one represented a sacrifice. Each one represented a rejection. 12,000 dead humans, and the Council still called them primitive. "They would say we are still young," she said finally, "still proving ourselves." Leaned forward. "Administrator, we have been proving ourselves for almost 300 years. How long does it take? When is it enough?" "I do not think it will ever be enough." The words hurt to say, but Carol knew they were true. "We are too different from them. We think differently. We solve problems differently, and that frightens them." "Then maybe," said slowly, "it is time we stop trying to be what they want us to be." Carol looked at him sharply. "What are you suggesting?" "Not war. We do not want that, and we might not win it anyway, but independence. Real independence. We start building a future that does not include the Council. We stop waiting for permission they will never give." The idea hung in the air. It was dangerous. It went against everything humanity had worked toward for centuries. But as Carol looked at the numbers floating before her, she could not find a single argument against it. "Set up a meeting," she said. "Quietly, key people only. I want to know what our options are." Over the following months, humanity began to change. On the surface, nothing looked different. Human diplomats still attended council sessions. Human ships still defended shared borders. Human doctors still treated alien patients. But underneath the familiar routines, something new was growing. Research stations appeared in distant systems, officially listed as survey posts. Trade networks were quietly reorganized to reduce dependence on council markets. Military exercises increased, practicing tactics that had nothing to do with defending council space. New contacts were made. Species on the edges of known space, too small or too remote for the council to care about, received visits from human ships. Partnerships formed. Agreements were signed. A network of allies grew in places the council never looked. And through it all, humanity kept smiling. They still helped when asked. They still answered distress calls. They were still the reliable junior partners everyone expected them to be. The council noticed nothing. Why would they? Humanity had always been dependable. There was no reason to think that would change. Ambassador Jonathan Miller, who had replaced Cole years ago, presented humanity's 11th petition for full membership. He stood in the great chamber where so many before him had stood, and he made the same arguments that had been made countless times before. The vote came, 16 against, 1 in favor. Only the remembering the blood shed above Prime still supported humanity. Jonathan received the result with a small nod. "The council's decision is noted," he said. Then he added something no human ambassador had ever said before. "Humanity thanks the council for its time. We will not be submitting another petition." The chamber went silent. Representatives looked at each other in confusion. In 300 years, no species seeking membership had ever voluntarily stopped asking. High Chancellor was there, brought out of retirement for what should have been a routine vote. He leaned forward, his old body tense. "Ambassador, please explain. Is humanity leaving the membership process?" "We are, Chancellor." Jonathan's voice was calm, almost peaceful. "Humanity has decided to take a different path." "What path?" "That remains to be seen. But we will continue to honor our existing agreements. We will remain friends to those who have been friends to us." He bowed slightly, turned, and walked out. The doors closed behind him. The council exploded into confused discussion. Sat in his chair and watched the place where the human had disappeared. He had lived for many centuries and seen many things, but this quiet withdrawal, this peaceful stepping back, was something entirely new. It frightened him more than any threat of war ever had. Later, alone in his quarters, called Cole. She had retired years ago, but he still had her contact information. Her face appeared on his screen, older now, but still sharp. "Chancellor," she said, "this is unexpected." "What is your species doing?" he asked directly. "What does this mean?" Was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, and there was something in that smile that made his blood run cold. "It means," she said softly, "that humanity is finally learning to love itself more than it loves the idea of being accepted by others." The connection closed. Sat in darkness for a long time, thinking about all the times humanity had asked for acceptance and been turned away. He thought about the blood they had shed, the lives they had given, the endless patience they had shown. And he realized with growing horror that patience had limits, that even the most loyal friend could eventually walk away, that the council had been given chance after chance to do the right thing, and every single time they had chosen wrong. The humans were not angry, that was the worst part, they were simply finished. And the galaxy would never be the same. 20 years after humanity stopped asking for acceptance, the galaxy learned what their absence truly meant. It happened slowly at first. When defense agreements expired, humanity thanked their partners and did not sign new ones. When trade contracts ended, human merchants simply found other markets in distant systems the Council had never bothered to explore. Distress calls still came, and for a while humanity still answered. But the responses grew less frequent. Ships were needed elsewhere. Resources were committed to other projects. Human observers still attended council sessions, but they rarely spoke. When they did, it was only to say humanity abstains on votes that no longer concerned them. The council did not worry. Other species would step up to fill the gap humanity left behind. They always had before. Except this time they did not. Commander Lisa Park stood on the bridge of her ship, the Morning Star, and watched a battle that would determine the fate of 3 worlds. She was 45 years old, a career officer who had spent her life preparing for exactly this kind of moment. The Shroud had returned. 3 massive vessels had broken through defensive lines in the sector, lines that had been designed using human tactics 20 years ago. The Council had classified those tactics, archived them, and never updated them. Now the old strategies were failing. Multiple contacts, her sensor officer reported. Council fleet is engaging, but they are badly outnumbered. Lisa watched the display with calm eyes. Ships were dying out there. Council ships, crewed by species who had voted against humanity again and again. They were fighting bravely, but their formations were outdated. Their weapons were not calibrated for modern Shroud vessels. They had become dependent on human support and had never learned to fight without it. "Any distress calls directed at us?" Lisa asked. "Negative, Commander. Council communications indicate they are handling the situation internally." Lisa nodded slowly. Of course they were. Humanity had been pushed out of all their defensive agreements. Their advice had been ignored for years. Why would the Council ask for help now, when they had spent so long insisting they did not need it? The battle lasted 6 hours. Lisa watched every minute of it. She saw Council ships try tactics that had stopped working decades ago. She saw commanders make mistakes that any human officer would have avoided. She saw bravery and courage wasted because no one had prepared for this enemy. 3 worlds fell. 18 million people died. When it was over, Lisa sat in her chair and stared at the display showing nothing but debris and darkness. "Set course for home," she said quietly. "This is not our fight anymore." The aftermath was chaos. The Council demanded answers. How had this happened? Where were the defenses? Why had no one seen this coming? And underneath all those questions was another one, spoken in whispers. Where were the humans? Ambassador Jonathan Miller was summoned to the council chamber. He walked in alone, gray-haired now, his face showing every one of his 62 years. He stood before the assembly with the same quiet dignity he had always shown. High Chancellor, who had replaced the retired, spoke first. "The council demands to know why human ships did not respond to the crisis in the sector." Jonathan looked at her calmly. "We received no request for assistance." "Your treaty obligations?" "Expired 4 years ago, Chancellor. We offered to renew them. The Council declined. Your representative said human military involvement was no longer necessary for regional security." Silence fell. Representatives checked their records and found that Jonathan was telling the truth. "We could not have known," someone began. "We warned you," Jonathan interrupted. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "We submitted reports about Shroud activity in that sector 6 years ago. Those reports were archived without being read. We offered updated defensive tactics 3 years ago. They were rejected as too aggressive." He paused, looking around the chamber at species he had spent his entire adult life trying to help. For 300 years, humanity gave everything it had to this council. We shed our blood for worlds that voted against our basic right to have a voice. We saved lives, built defenses, shared knowledge, and asked only to be treated as equals. His voice dropped lower. You never gave us that. You took what we offered and told us we were not good enough. You used us when you needed us and ignored us when you did not. Old was there, brought out of retirement again. He rose from his seat, his body trembling. You could have helped. You had the power to save those worlds. Yes, Chancellor, we did. Jonathan met his eyes without flinching. And we chose not to use it, because we finally understood that no amount of sacrifice would ever earn your respect. So we stopped sacrificing for those who would never value what we gave. 18 million dead, said. Does that mean nothing to you? Jonathan's composure cracked for just a moment. Pain flickered across his face, there and gone in an instant. It means everything to me, he said quietly. I will carry those deaths with me for the rest of my life. But we did not kill those people, Chancellor. We simply stopped saving a galaxy that made clear, over and over, that we were not wanted in it. He straightened his shoulders. Humanity will honor its remaining agreements. We will not interfere with council affairs, but we will no longer die for those who never accepted us. Find someone else to be your shield. We are done. He turned and walked out. The doors closed behind him. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Representatives looked at each other, at their records, at the data showing all the times humanity had warned them and been ignored. They saw the truth laid out before them in numbers and dates and rejected proposals. Lowered himself back into his seat. He was very old now, and he felt every year of his long life pressing down on him. What have we done? He whispered. No one answered, because deep down they all knew. They had taken humanity for granted. They had used them, dismissed them, rejected them, and assumed they would always be there anyway. And now humanity was gone, not destroyed, not defeated, just gone. They had simply stopped caring about species who had never cared about them. The Council had always feared that humanity might become an enemy. They had never considered the possibility that humanity might become nothing at all. A closed door, a turned back, a silence where there had once been a hand reaching out in friendship. That silence, they were beginning to realize, was worse than any war could have been. 10 years after the fall of the worlds, the galaxy had changed in ways no one had expected. Humanity was thriving. Their exploration of unmapped space had found resources, allies, and opportunities that the Council had never imagined existed. New species joined the human coalition, younger races who had been ignored or exploited by the established powers. They found in humanity a partner who treated them as equals, who listened to their concerns, who valued their contributions. The Council, meanwhile, was struggling. Without human innovation, their technology had stagnated. Without human soldiers, their borders had weakened. Without human trade, economies that had relied on their goods for decades were failing. Species that had voted against humanity for centuries now sent messages asking for trade agreements, defensive partnerships, the relationships they had once rejected. Human diplomats received them politely. They listened carefully, and more often than not they said no. "We have existing commitments," became the standard answer. "Perhaps in the future when our resources allow." It was never a hard refusal, but it was never acceptance either. Humanity had learned patience from the Council. Now they were teaching it back. Chancellor made a decision that no Council leader had made in 200 years. She traveled to Earth herself. Her ship landed on a platform overlooking a great city that had not existed when humanity first reached the stars. Towers of glass and light rose toward the sky. Ships came and went from orbiting stations. Children played in gardens filled with flowers from 100 different worlds. President Blake met her at the landing pad. He was a tall man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He had spent his whole life watching his species be rejected by those they tried to help. "Chancellor," he said warmly, "welcome to Earth." Looked around at everything humanity had built. Your civilization has grown greatly since our last official contact. We learned from good teachers, replied. We watched, we adapted, and we learned that the only species we could truly count on was ourselves. They walked through the city together, showed her schools where children learned the languages of a dozen allied species. He showed her hospitals where doctors treated patients regardless of what world they came from. He showed her monuments to those who had died in service to the old council, names carved in stone so they would never be forgotten. We made mistakes, finally said. The council, our predecessors, we failed to see what was in front of us. Stopped walking. He turned to face her, and his kind eyes had grown sad. You saw exactly what you wanted to see. You saw humanity as useful but dangerous, valuable but not equal. We were convenient when we were saving your worlds, and invisible when we asked for respect. He shook his head slowly. Do you know what hurt most, Chancellor? It was not the rejections. It was that you never even considered that you might be wrong. For 300 years we begged for acceptance. We sacrificed for your approval. We died for your protection. And every time we asked to be recognized, we were told we were not ready. His voice grew quieter. We were never going to be ready, were we? Your standards were designed to keep us out. Had no answer. She knew in her heart that he was speaking the truth. What would it take, she asked, to restore the relationship between our peoples? Was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. I do not know. Trust, once broken, takes generations to rebuild, and humanity has other concerns now. We have allies who stood by us when the Council would not, partners who value us without demanding that we prove ourselves worthy of basic respect. He looked up at the sky, where ships bearing the human flag moved among the stars. You are welcome to trade with us, to cooperate on matters of mutual interest, but if you are asking us to come back to be what we were before, he shook his head, that humanity no longer exists. We had to change to survive what you put us through. Return to the Council with no treaty, no agreement, no promise of renewed partnership. She stood before the assembly and delivered her report, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. Humanity is lost to us, she said simply. Not through war, not through conflict, through our own blindness. She looked around the chamber at species who had benefited from human sacrifice for hundreds of years. They came to us in good faith, and we drove them away with our arrogance. They saved us again and again, and we rewarded them with rejection. They asked only to be treated as equals, and we told them they were not worthy. Her voice broke slightly. Now they are gone, and we are left with only the shame of understanding too late what we threw away. The chamber fell silent. Outside, in the vast darkness between stars, humanity continued on its own path. They were not angry. They were not bitter. They were simply separate. They had learned to stop caring about those who had never cared about them. In the histories written by council scholars in the centuries that followed, the era of human involvement would be remembered as a golden age, a time when help was always available, when someone was always willing to answer the call, when a young species gave everything it had and asked for almost nothing in return. The loss of humanity was never blamed on military defeat or diplomatic failure. It was recorded, simply and painfully, as the consequence of shame. The greatest ally the galaxy had ever known had walked away without a sound. No final battle, no angry words, just a quiet closing of doors that would never open again. And those who remained were left to wonder forever what might have been different, what could have been saved, what future might have existed if they had only learned before it was too late to say two simple words. You belong. But they never said it, and humanity walked away, and the council was left alone in the darkness, surrounded by stars that now belonged to someone else. The humans had a saying, one that thought about often in the years that followed. You never know what you have until it is gone. The council knew now. They knew exactly what they had lost. And that knowledge was their punishment. Not war, not revenge, just the endless, quiet shame of having driven away the best friends they would ever have. Silently, humanity had walked away. And the silence they left behind was louder than any scream.